Good evening, one and all, to our June chapter meeting. Excited about tonight's meeting. 125 years of Badger State baseball cards with Jason Schwartz. I'm not a heavy baseball collector. I buy full sets of tops. I go back into the 80s. I got intimidated going to card shows when 12-year-old kids knew so much more than I did that I just kind of stopped going to them. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what I don't know today, which is probably a lot. So Jason, thank you for joining us. Before we start, Mark Armour, who is the president of the SABR board, has joined us because he's a huge baseball card aficionado as well. And I thought it'd be good if Mark would just kick off and talk a little about Summer of SABR, which starts this weekend.
Sure, Dennis. So for the record, I didn't join the meeting in order to participate necessarily, because I just got an invite. I'm not sure why exactly. And I said, sure, I'll go. And so here I am. So a couple things that you might be interested in, if you haven't heard, I expect everyone's heard, but the Summer of SABR, which is the sort of replacement for the convention this year, is going to be a bunch of online Zoom content over the course of the summer, really mostly on 3 different weekends: a weekend in June, weekend in July, and a weekend in August. There's also something for the 50th anniversary of SABR that particular day, which is not on the weekend. It's August 10th as well. So it's a handful of stuff. It starts this weekend. It starts tomorrow, in fact. And if you haven't registered, I suggest that you do so. It's pretty cheap. I think it's $35 or something like that for SABR members for the whole summer. And tomorrow there's a panel on the future of women in baseball. There's a survey about that someone took that they're reporting results on about what baseball is going to be like in 50 years, I believe. There's another panel on potential rules changes, what people think about them. There's something tomorrow about the Negro Leagues becoming major leagues. SABR is doing that, but a lot of other organizations as well. There's a business meeting. So it really goes on kind of all weekend, and then you get a month's rest, and then it comes back in July. But highly recommend it. It's only 2.5, 3-hour blocks in those parts, so nobody's going to get completely worn out sitting in a room for hours and hours. So I recommend going to sabr.org and seeing what it is you're interested in, and signing up. And it should be a lot of fun. And on Saturday, I know that Dennis told me this is a tradition for your chapter, but on Saturday, after a fairly short 2-hour session, which includes the annual business meeting, which includes the presentation of the Bob Davids Award at 5 o'clock Eastern time, there is a happy hour. So everybody's going to hopefully stay online and have a drink. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, my understanding, did I read this right, that the Jerry Malloy conference is part of this? Like if you register for the SABR virtual, that's included with it, or is that a separate?
No, that's basically so in order to, yes, because the Jerry Malloy conference has not happened in a few years, they essentially, the middle month, the July month, is going to be all traditional Jerry Malloy content. Okay. The schedule is not yet on the website because it's more or less being handled by the Negro Leagues committee, and they haven't produced a schedule for Scott yet, but it's all going to be Negro Leagues content in July.
Cool.
So hopefully I'll see some of you.
Yep. I like that conference. The 19th Century Conference was online, and it's a good way for SABR members who've never gone to them just to see what they're like, and the analytics was as well. And so having an opportunity to participate this year, I hopefully will see that members are going to want to do that again next year, and maybe in person. So that would be really good. So.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mark. I understand you're also coming towards Wisconsin in August.
Yeah, so at the end of August, the last weekend in August, I'm driving through. I should be through with Milwaukee on the 26th. There is a day game that day. And I sent a note to Dennis saying, hey, I'm going to be there. Anybody want to go to the game? Is a friend, a SABR guy, Jeff Bauer, is coming with me. So there'll be two of us, and we were planning on going to the game anyway. And Dennis said, sure, I'll get a tailgater going. Mm-hmm. And although I've been to Brewers games a few times, I've never been to a tailgater, which is a little bit of a baseball bucket list for me. So anybody who's up for it, baseball, beer, should be fun.
Yep. I already talked to Rick Schabowski about a tailgate because Rick likes to do tailgate parties. So I think we can do that. And that was my one question for you is, will you get in town early enough for a tailgate party for, I think it's a 12-10 ball game. So yeah, we can definitely do a tailgate party. It'd be a good time. So
yeah, we can be there. We can be there in the late morning or something.
Okay, cool. That works. So anyone interested, let me know. I will get a blurb out there as well, probably in the newsletter, so that we're talking about this. We can work that out. So
may I ask what a tailgate party is?
Sure. It's we have a huge parking lot, so we've got the advantage that we can park in the parking lot, and people and some people are very elaborate what they bring. They bring their grills and tables, and generally we have brats, Italian sausages. Some people do chicken. I've seen people do steak, but it's just a chance to sit out in the parking lot, drink beer, eat food, and talk baseball. And yeah,
I've never heard of tailgating associated with baseball before.
Yeah, same thing as football, except we do, and it's been a tradition in Milwaukee forever and ever. I know that when they built I'm gonna lose battery power here. Let me plug this puppy in. When they were looking at replacing County Stadium with whatever the name of this ballpark is today, they wanted to go downtown, and there was a big battle that no, we want to keep it on that site because you go downtown, you can't do tailgating in a parking structure, and so Bud Selig won on that one. I think Bud really was pushing.
American Family Field. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Really, it's not Miller Park?
No. No, the contract with Miller ran out, and they didn't want to spend the money, so American Family Insurance out of Madison picked up the name. So, yeah.
Damn, I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't spend
That'll count as a new stadium.
2 years from now, probably.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Jason, let's get started. Let me do a quick introduction on you. You're the co-chair of SABR's Baseball Card Committee. But you have other interests at Negro Leagues, Dwight Gooden, Steve Garvey, J.R. Richard, Mel Ott, and Hank Aaron. That's a wild assortment of ball players. That's kind of interesting. And you're also known as Heavy J. And we'll talk more on that a little later after we talk about 125 years of Badger State baseball cards.
Awesome.
And to start it out, I have a standard icebreaker. I think I've heard you on other podcasts. I think I've even heard you answer this, but I'm not sure everybody else will know it. But what is your favorite? Well, who was your favorite baseball team growing up?
Okay, easy one for me. I won't make a lot of friends from my answer, but I grew up in Los Angeles in the 1970s, and so we did have the Angels nearby, but the Dodgers were the only game in town, and they had so many players that just the whole city loved. Steve Garvey, Dusty Baker, Ron Say. It was just an easy team to fall in love with for a kid. So stuck with that, through the present.
So then the follow-up question on that, and you're probably listed already here. Who was your favorite player?
Yeah, as a kid, definitely Steve Garvey.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was like a rule, if you were 9 years old in 1979 in LA, it wasn't put to you that you could choose your favorite player. It was kind of just assigned that, okay, all right, your favorite player is Steve Garvey. He's on the Dodgers. He plays first base. There was no choice in the matter, but I don't regret it. I'm good with it.
And who had that power to do that assignment?
Just pure pressure. Like you show up to the first day of school and if you want to be friends with the other kids, of course you have to worship Steve Garvey.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so when we chatted about doing something on baseball cards, you came up with the title that I think is wonderful, 125 Years of Badger State Baseball Cards. So what can you tell us about, as you said, cardboard in the last 125 years here in Wisconsin?
Well, I managed to prepare a few notes. If it's okay, I may share some slides. How's that go?
That'd be great.
All right, so let me do that real quick.
Let me ask you a quick question, Jason. Wait
Yes.
for questions until the end of presentation, or can people ask as we go?
I think it's okay to ask as we go if it's really kind of timely. If not, I'd say maybe save till the end.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, fantastic. Well, at SABR, we're all about accuracy. So if you came here to learn about 125 years of Badger State baseball cards, I have news for you. It's 134 years. So right, as I worked on this presentation, I found more and more. So hopefully nobody's disappointed with the extra 9 years. It may take an extra 9 minutes out of your life, but hopefully be worth it. So some of this I think got covered. I'm the co-chair of SABR's Baseball Cards Research Committee, succeeding Mark on the call, in fact, or appointed by Mark, along with my co-chair, Nick Vosbrink, out of the Casey Stengel chapter. SABR Chicago member since 2019, but you already asked us. People ask me, SABR Chicago, Cubs or Sox? Well, Dodgers. Collecting interests, probably the biggest tie-in to Milwaukee or Wisconsin is the great Hank Aaron. So I've got really, I'm going to call it the highlight of my collection, shown there, my 50 best Hank Aaron cards covering his whole career. But also some Dodger guys and Dwight Gooden and miscellaneous other things I collect. Dennis mentioned the heavy J part. Something I started doing during the pandemic was trying to raise money for a lot of great causes using baseball card art. So cutting up old baseball cards can sound crazy to some folks, but the little series of pictures along the bottom just shows some pretty simple kind of arts and crafts I do. But believe it or not, I have raised now $17,000 toward my $25,000 goal, just making cards like this. And obviously the pandemic seems to be coming to an end. So it's a race against the clock for me. I may not make it, not because I'm sick of making little cards, but simply because maybe the pandemic will finally end. I'm not sure, we'll see. But anyways, with that, I have a few acknowledgements. First thing I'll share, almost every card picture you see from here on comes from Trading Card Database. This is news to some collectors, believe it or not. There is a website, tcdb.com, Trading Card Database, that has pictures of almost every single card, right? That's really convenient to search by year, by player, by team, etc. It's really amazing. You can see the front, you can see the back. I use tcdb.com even more than I use Baseball Reference. I'll call those my two essential websites as a baseball and baseball card person. But TCDB, if you haven't been there and you love baseball cards, you could be pretty impressed. There's some stuff I'm going to cover on the move from Boston to Milwaukee, and my friend Tim Jenkins from the Pacific Northwest chapter had an article on that on the SABR Baseball Cards blog, and so I borrowed a bit from that. And then Matthew's in the house today. So I'll mention my first article for the SABR Baseball Cards blog. I've written probably about 60 by now. But my very first one was inspired by one of Matthew's articles from your chapter called Like a Broken Record. So those are some quick acknowledgements, and we'd love to get right into the content. But I'm coupling the presentation with some trivia challenges. I know in Wisconsin, as much as Alex Trebek was beloved, he's only the second favorite Jeopardy host. So, so we've got Aaron Rodgers in the house today. So first question, get your pencil and paper out, or you could try to keep track in your head. Here we go. Which 4 Hall of Fame players were born in Wisconsin? Notice I'm saying players, so Bud Selig ineligible for this one. Which 4 Hall of Fame players were born in Wisconsin? I'm not going to give you a lot of time or we'll be here all night. So jot them down or think of them, and I'll soon reveal the answers. Okay, here we go. Give yourself a point for Al Simmons, Give yourself a point for Kid Nichols. Give yourself a point for Burley Grimes. And give yourself one final point for Addie Joss. Yeah. Now, I'll try to avoid too many tangents, but I'll say one thing that's very unique about the Addie Joss card that I've shown. It's from a 1911 American Tobacco Company set, usually just called Gold Borders, well, anyway, what I'll say that's special about it, it's sort of a bummer, but it's special about the card, is if you flip the card over, it actually references Addie Joss's death. So it is the first mainstream baseball card from sort of a popular, widely distributed issue, the first mainstream card to reference a player's death on the back. So a little bit of Wisconsin Hall of Famer baseball card trivia there. Okay, so some of you may have gotten all 5 points. Some of you maybe got 1 or 2 or 0. That's okay. And at any rate, let's move on. So in the title of the presentation, we talk about this 134 years of Badger State baseball cards being the prehistory of 1971 Topps Phil Roof, which is kind of a bizarre title. And so here I am explaining why. And that is that 1971 was the first set of Topps baseball cards to include Milwaukee Brewers, right? Even though the Brewers were playing in Milwaukee in 1970, Topps put out Seattle Pilots cards that year. They usually did a pretty good job predicting what the season would look like, but that's when I bet they wish in 70 they put out Brewers, but they put out Pilots. So at any rate, your first Brewers cards came in 1971, and there were 30 Brewers cards in the set, which sounds like a big number, and it is. It's 25 players, which maybe sounds a little more standard, but also a manager card, a team card. And if you collected in the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc., you're probably familiar with those cards that would have 2 or 3 or 4 rookies on them, future stars or top prospects, etc. So there were 3 such cards of those with Brewers. So there's our 30 Brewers in that set. Now, in that set, the lowest numbered card was of the Brewers was number 22. You can see the 22 in the upper left-hand corner of the back of Phil Roof's card. So by convention, one might call that the first Topps Brewer card, right? By convention. So is 1971 Topps Phil Roof the very first Topps Milwaukee Brewer? Well, yes and no. By convention, yes, but the way Topps issued cards back then, and interestingly enough, they've kind of returned to it now, is they didn't just dump a whole set of 500 or 600 or 700 cards onto the shelves in March or April, but they did things in series or batches, right? And so their first series, which I'm going to imagine, I didn't look it up, but I'm going to imagine would have hit the stores around March and April, kind of timed with the start of the baseball season, was 132 different cards, rather than being printed on a 132 card sheet, which would have made a lot of sense to me. These 132 cards were split across 2 different sheets that each had 66 cards twice, the same 66 twice. I won't belabor that point, but the point is across these 2 sheets, there's only 132 different cards. 5 of them are Brewers. The one outlined in red is Phil Roof, right? But one could make a claim that the other 4 Brewers who I've listed are tied for first as the very first Topps Milwaukee Brewers cards. So take your pick there. I'll point out a couple of famous cards in the sheet, or maybe readily identifiable top players are Reggie Jackson leading off my first sheet. And then the nature of these sheets repeating is that if you go halfway down the sheet, there he is again on the far left in the 7th row. And then another famous card to the far right of the first sheet is the Thurman Munson All-Star Rookie Trophy card, which is a very, very popular card. Generally places in the top 2 or 3 among collectors when the question is asked, what was the best Topps baseball card of the 1970s? So anyways, not relevant exactly to Milwaukee, but I can't look at the sheet and not call those out. Okay, but there were earlier Milwaukee Brewers cards. Some of you may have been in Milwaukee and seen some of these things happen. I will acknowledge I have never once held any of these in my hand. I may have seen some at card shows, but mostly it's thanks to the internet that I even know about these. So 1970 Flavorest Milk, Dave Bristol, but there's a whole team worth. I just picked one to show. 1970 Jd Murthy Postcards. So this was a gentleman who typically produced postcards. And I think one of the main uses was to give a stack to the players so they could sign autographs on a cool picture of themselves. Coincidentally, another gentleman who did similar as a photographer is named Doug Mcwilliams. He is the winner of the 2021 SABR Jefferson Burdick Award for contributions to the baseball card hobby. But I'm going to tie Doug Mcwilliams and the Jd Murthy Postcards together by letting you guys know, and you're the first to know. This is not announced publicly because we don't want to ruin the surprise for Doug, but Ted Kubiak himself, the player portrayed on this postcard, will in fact be joining the awards ceremony to help honor Doug. And so if any of you have Ted Kubiak memories going back to the early 1970s or whatever, he will be there. He will be there saying some kind things about our award winner. And, we don't want to deflect attention from Doug, but, potentially somebody could ask him a question and, maybe he'd answer. So you're the first to know. You're the first to know. Ted Kubiak will be there, and there may be some other VIPs in the house for that ceremony. You're all welcome, of course. Okay, but what else? McDonald's. I really like these. I'm kind of a sucker for like the art stuff. So I like these. 1970 Mike Anderson postcards. I like the look of these too. That's a cool photo. 1970 picture pack. I did not do a lot of research. Usually with picture packs, they were available at the stadium gift shops. This may have been distributed a different way, but knowing little else, I'll make that my guess. And then a kind of interesting set with early Milwaukee Brewers cards, if we want to call them cards, are the Dayton Daily News, so not out of Wisconsin, but Ohio, just pictured guys in the newspaper and sort of gave it a, even though it was newsprint and you just cut it out of the piece of newspaper, it sort of had the look of the front of a baseball card. It kind of had the sorts of information you'd see on the back of a baseball card. One of the things we cover a little bit on the SABR Baseball Cards blog is, what is a baseball card? Some people would say this is not one, but we would generally take the view that, yeah, let's count it. Plus it says bubble gumless card on the top. So there you go. But at any rate, this set, unlike the others, includes non-brewers as well. So here's Mike Hegan, but you'd find other players as well in the set. It was sort of a broader issue. Okay, but here we go. Much earlier Milwaukee Brewers. So a SABR audience is one of the few that's not surprised to know that the Brewers were around before 1970. Not as a National League or American League team, but I think in this case, American Association for this time in their lives. So the famous P206 set, maybe the most famous set of the early 20th century, the one that the really expensive Honus Wagner card comes from, old habits die hard, in fact included a lot of minor leaguers, whether it was Southern League or International League or American Association, and there were in fact 4 Brewers. So that's something that a lot of collectors, unless they collect this set, don't really think about. They assume it'd be American League, National League, but you've got those old Milwaukee Brewers from circa 1909-ish, like Shad Berry, who's shown, Dan McGann, but not White House counsel Dan McGann. He's just not that old. This one's an interesting one, and some people in the audience may have some insight here, so I'll be interested to hear at the end of the talk. This is Stoney Mcguinn, right, who is a pretty accomplished pitcher, even a little bit in the majors. He had kind of a Madison Bumgarner 7-inning-ish no-hitter called To Darkness, but did a few things. Now, I put not that Stoney Mcguinn because I believe the sports editor for the Milwaukee Sentinel-Journal was also named Stoney Mcguinn in the 1930s and into maybe even into the 1940s. I couldn't definitively find that they were different people, and I certainly found no clue that they were the same person other than the name and a Milwaukee connection. However, I did find a quote attributed to the sports editor from 1944, And according to the SABR bio and Baseball Reference, the pitcher died in 1941. So I'm going to say they're different people. Are they father, son, or, I don't know. So if you all know, I'd be interested to learn the answer. So for now, I said, not that.
If I could quickly interrupt.
Yes.
Yeah, Stoney McGuinn, the ball player, was not the sports editor.
No.
He retired to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. And that's where he's buried too.
Perfect. Do you know, are
And
they
incidentally
related?
enough, I've got that one right here.
There you go. There you go. No, you have an amazing collection. Do you know, are they related at all, or hard to say?
I don't believe so.
Yeah. I as long as this presentation is, I could only devote maybe 10 extra credit minutes to questions like these. So I never really found it. I figured I'd just bring it here, but okay. And then finally, Newt Randall. So the point is 4 Brewers in that famous T206 set. Now, are these the first Milwaukee Brewers baseball cards? Well, you can tell when I ask the question that way, the answer is probably no. So what are the very earliest? And again, this comes down to your definition of what's a card. You might not think of a little pin that you wear on your shirt as a card, but it tends to be classified, broadly speaking, as baseball cards or things that baseball card collectors might collect if they ever found one. So I will indicate there was a set of these pins that came with gum as early as 1896. There were 3 brewers. Sometimes with these older sets, the full checklist isn't known, but evidently at least these 3 brewers were in the set. I could not locate a picture of any. These pins tend to be hard to find. So I'm showing you somebody with Pittsburgh just to give you an idea of what the release looked like. So at any rate, that was the best I could do. I believe I believed when I made this slide, hence the 125 years, that 1896 was the earliest I would find Brewers cards. Boy, was I wrong, which is why we upgraded to 134 years. So, but we're not there yet. Yeah, we're not there yet. Other early Milwaukee Brewers cards, 1911, by the way, Stoney Mcguinn is back. He's upside down. This was kind of a neat thing. There were some pretty innovative baseball cards going far back. And I'm going to say 1910, 1911, 1912 was almost a golden age of innovation in my mind, because you could fold this card, you could fold Stoney down to the other side, and he would actually inherit essentially the legs of James Barrett. So yeah, so kind of cool. But at any rate, double folders is the name of that. Topps ended up doing the same thing in 1955. Probably was aware of this and borrowed from the style, or I suppose it could have been coincidence. But the cards look so similar that I'll say they must have been aware. Okay, what else though? We've got 1912 to 13 Colgan's chips, and don't picture potato chips. Picture more like little tiny things of gummish stuff, sort of. But anyway, so 1912-ish. 1933, I went with a sort of non-traditional picture because this is from our SABR Baseball Cards blog. We had a professional writer who just writes beautifully, actually write about this very card. So this is the 1933 Gowdy set. I mentioned T206 as probably the most famous set of the early 20th century. If 1933 still counts as early-ish, I'd say this is the second most famous set, known for its Babe Ruth cards, its Lou Gehrig cards, etc. Less so for Frank O'Rourke, but he enters the set as one of 15 minor leaguers and the only Brewer. But there are also in the set, there is a Toronto Maple Leaf. There is a Kansas City Blue, who you've probably heard of because his name is Tris Speaker, and so on and so on. I think there's even an Oakland Oak. So 15 minor leaguers in all, including Frank O'Rourke. So I just want to check. I'm a little nervous that I missed, somehow skipped over a slide that I really liked. Well, okay. Hopefully it's later. Hopefully I didn't delete it or we're back to 125, but I promise I had 134. But now you've survived the warm-up round of Jeopardy. Let's go into round 1. Okay, so we're still on other early Milwaukee Brewers cards. This one, again, with the SABR audience, some may say too easy, and others, if it's not too easy, it's because it's too hard probably, but okay. Your question is just, who is this? You get a point if you get it right. So don't say it out loud. You don't want to anybody else, but if you know who it is, small hint, 1944, and an M on the cap. So this is from a Lincoln Studio set, kind of an unusual, hard to find set. And the answer is Casey Stengel.
Ah.
Okay. And he replaced, I believe, Charlie Grimm as the manager of the Brewers. I'm definitely not the Brewers historian by any means, but I think I picked that up when I was reading a little bit on how Casey Stengel ended up with the Brewers. Right. Oh gosh, I think I somehow did lose my slide that I really liked. We'll see. I'll bring it at the end. Okay, spoiler alert. There were Milwaukee Brewers cards as early as 1887, and I had a slide with some nice pictures from two sets, one called Buchner Gold Coin and one called Old Judge. Old Judge might be your most famous set of the 19th century, perhaps. It's certainly gigantic, and at any rate. So there were Brewers cards that early. I sure hope I didn't delete my picture, or my whole slide. But anyways, but you all know, because I'm talking to the Ken Keltner chapter, that Milwaukee, oh, ha ha ha, I just remembered. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. A little bit of a brain lapse, but we're back in business. No, those were the earliest Brewers cards, but here's the whole point. Milwaukee, of course, had another team, not just the Brewers. Milwaukee, of course, was also known for the
Braves.
Milwaukee Cream Cities. Exactly, you got it. So the Milwaukee Cream Cities are how we get all the way back to 1887 when we're thinking about Milwaukee or Wisconsin baseball cards. So there's our 134 years, 1887 to 2021. And you can see players perhaps you've heard of: Joe Strauss, Tom Morrissey, Tom Forster, and Bill Hart. If you haven't heard of them, I'm not sure what chapter knows them. So, but at any rate, there's that. And then I mentioned the Old Judge set, a very famous baseball name, Clark Griffith, with Milwaukee, and then William Fuller, William Schenkel, and Frank Wells. And I for each of the players shown, multiple cards with multiple poses. That was kind of a typical thing with the set, that with a player, you might see him holding a bat, then you might see him holding a glove, then you might see him in kind of a throwing motion. And I'll call your attention to the card on the far right, which is the Frank Wells, and you see a ball in the air. Yes. Good chance, in fact, I'm going to say 100% chance that ball is actually hanging by a piece of, right? So there was no real action photography going on with this set, but they really worked hard to try to simulate action. And so balls on strings were one of the hallmarks of the set. And then there are even some interesting sort of multiplayer things where they pretend a guy just slid into a base. You know, they tried hard to get action. So, okay. There we go, 1887. I was thinking Brewers, of course, Cream Cities. But you all know, here we go now. You all know Milwaukee had another major league team. So here we go, which was the
Braves.
Yeah, them too. But I'm here to focus on the newly designated Major League 1923 Negro National League Milwaukee Bears, right? So as of December 2020, regarded as a major league team by Major League Baseball, shortly after that by the SABR task force on such questions, and then as of about a week ago, Baseball Reference as well. So they only lasted a year, 1923, the Milwaukee Bears, and there are no baseball cards I could find of the Milwaukee Bears from 1923, but the Brewers have had a few throwback nights, or throwback days maybe, and I believe these two cards depict the Milwaukee Bears uniform. And they, in about 40 minutes of searching, they were the only two I could come across, but there may be others. So just examples. Okay, and finally, yes, Milwaukee did have another major league team, and that was the Braves, who of course moved from Boston in 1953. So let's take a look and get a sense of their baseball cards, and we'll start with the early days. So Topps, I will as well, but I'll start with Topps. 1953 Topps Braves. Topps did something interesting in 1953. The first 9 Braves in the set are shown completely Boston. B's on the caps, and you'll notice at the bottom of each card, Boston Braves, right? That probably tells you something about when these cards were finalized and ready to print and all this stuff. You all know better than me. I think the move was in March. Yeah, the move was in March, which is cutting it pretty close to baseball season. So these cards, you know, in the first two series of 1953, it was all Boston. Now it gets interesting because the final 7 Braves in the set, coming from series 3 and 4, are shown as Milwaukee. They've got M's on the cap. I don't believe that M is what the team actually wore, but I think somebody at Topps just said, let's change B's to M's, right? And so there you go. But at any rate, you know, it was a curious set, not the only set and not the only instance where this has happened, but still not very typical for within the same set of baseball cards, a team to change cities. And that's what we have here. So we saw some Boston Braves and some Milwaukee Braves. We can look how the competitor to Topps and even the maybe the Topps was somewhat of an upstart in 53. So the competitor who'd been around a while doing baseball cards handled the same move. But it's time for round 2 of Jeopardy. So we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Here we go. First, I'll tell you how they did it, and I'll be careful not to accidentally say anybody's name. So in 1953, Bowman kind of put out 2 sets. Collectors know them as Bowman Color and Bowman Black and White. The black and white set starts at number 1 and goes through whatever, not a very big number, by the way. The color set starts at number 1 and goes through whatever. So they sort of look like 2 different sets. Folks who've studied these things and you know, I'll mention, I think Keith Olbermann shared his opinion with me on this, was that it was really kind of more like 1 set, and Bowman at some point figured out that the color photography and printing was just too expensive. Therefore, they kind of finished the set in black and white. So it sort of looks like 2 sets, but you could think of it as 1 if you like. Point is, I'll break it down as 2. The first 3 Braves in the color set are shown with Boston. So we've got the bees on the hats. The 53 Bowman design didn't include any other information on the front. So you can't see whether, you know, it should say Milwaukee or Boston or anything. However, if you were to flip them over, I didn't bring those pictures, they would say on the back, Boston. So the first card is an example of that. The first card shown has a B on the cap, and if you flip it over, it would say Boston Braves. The next 6 Braves in the color set have that same Boston uniform on the front, like this middle player who perhaps some of you have heard of, but don't give it away. But if you flip it over, it'll say Milwaukee Braves. So that's kind of interesting. So again, just like Topps, a switch from Boston Braves to Milwaukee Braves, only no change to the front of the card. And then finally, when you hit the black and white set, which was produced after both of these color series, there are 5 more Braves. They're all still shown in Boston uniforms. And again, you flip it over and you see Milwaukee. So it's really just kind of like the second category. So your Jeopardy question is to name each of these 3 players, jot them down, you'll get a point for each. Okay, and the answers are about to appear. Sam Jethro, Warren Spahn, and Lou Burdett. Okay, so 1 point per correct answer, no penalty for a wrong answer. Okay, so as a Hank Aaron collector, and since you're the Ken Keltner chapter that includes Hank Aaron's great history in Milwaukee and even Eau Claire, I'm just gonna share, it's sort of a detour to the storyline here. I'm just going to share some favorite Hank Aaron cards. I'm going to start with the 1950s. I've got his Topps rookie card from 1954. Next to it, I have what I like to nickname his cookie rookie. And it was a food issue from Johnston Cookies. I don't know if anybody goes back that far to remember eating Johnston cookies, but at any rate, you could get a Hank Aaron. Yeah, okay. His 1957 Topps, notable because they flipped the photo, so you can see Mr. Aaron batting left-handed, if you like. So anyways, no respect. Now you do get a true switch hitter, Mickey Mantle, sharing a card from 1958. And this card, even though, of course, these 2 teams met in the World Series in 57 and 58, and the card is 58, the card is looking back on the 1957 World Series between the Yankees and the Braves. And then one of the cards highest up on my want list, but it's so unaffordable that I know I'll never get it, is Hank Aaron's Home Run Derby card from 1959. That's a very, very tough set. This card folded in half and with like pen marks and pinholes all over it, probably even in that shape would be about $800, I'd say. So anyway, but some beautiful Hank Aaron cards of the 50s. Let's move to the 1960s. And no, we're not doing any Atlanta in this one, right? We're sticking with Milwaukee. We've got kind of another local issue. This first one is 1960. It's called Lake to Lake Dairy. It's an interesting card. It doesn't show on the example I have here, but these cards were stapled to milk cartons, right? So if you see these cards in the wild, almost always they have either two little pinholes from the staple if somebody removed it very carefully, or as you can imagine, most people just sort of ripped it off the milk carton. So you have quite a tear in the upper right-hand corner of most of the cards. Now you could also redeem these cards for prizes. And if you did, you'd get your prize, and Lake to Lake Dairy was kind enough to send you back your original card, only they would hole punch it to make sure you didn't keep doing that. And so again, if you look at these cards, or look for them in the wild, they are very hard to find. It took me a few years to find my Hank Aaron, but many of them also have a hole punched through them. So yes, I think later, many years later, many years later, somebody sort of showed up at the business and said, hey, the cards used to staple to milk cartons. Did you happen to keep any of those around that were left over? And somebody made out with, like, you know, hundreds of these in mint condition, no hole punch, no staple, no anything. So every now and then you'll see one of those hit the market. But anyways, 1962, for whatever reason, I just think aesthetically that's Hank Aaron's finest card. 1962 tops with the kind of wood grain border. I just love everything about it. 63, I love his card with Ernie Banks. 64, his card with Willie Mays. So he kept good company. And then also in 64, called the top stand-up, you could sort of go along the die cut and sort of punch Hank out and then fold back the yellow, and you'd have like a little, you know, hitting Hank Aaron standing on your desk or something like that. So some highlights of the 60s. And of course, a couple of years after that, we would see him as an Atlanta Brave. So we'll skip that and we'll go to the 1970s. I've skipped all the way to 1976, although he had some Brewers cards, of course, in 1975. I tend to think none of them are very attractive. They say there's no such thing as a bad Hank Aaron card, like a bad looking Hank Aaron card. I just think his 75s are kind of icky compared to almost anything else he's ever been on. So here we go, 1976. Since I'm with the Baseball Cards Research Committee, I will just note the Jefferson Burdick Award connection in a couple cases. So obviously Hank Aaron was not our 2020 winner, but this card was produced by Mike Aaronstein's company, and Mike Aaronstein was our 2020 winner. Mike Aaronstein's companies, I should say, were TCMA and SSPC. SSPC produced this card. Now, small world, here's our 2021 Jefferson Burdick Award winner. And we've only had 2 awards. So this is the whole universe of Burdick Award winners in these 2 1976 Hank Aaron cards. Well, again, Hank Aaron wasn't the winner, but this photograph was taken by Doug Mcwilliams, who is our winner, right? Now, you might be expecting me to click on the next card and it'll say 2022 Jefferson Burdick Award winner. No, I don't know. We don't know who it is yet, to be honest, but if it has a connection to that card, I will be shocked. Okay, moving on to Jeopardy round 3. So that was our Hank Aaron detour. This could be astounding. All I'm gonna say is think big. That's my hint, think big. So you might wonder, hey, some of these cards look pretty cool. What if I wanted to collect all the Milwaukee Braves cards ever made? Or what if I wanted to collect all the Milwaukee Brewers, and we'll just say the Major League Baseball Brewers, not the American Association. What if I wanted to collect them all? Could I do that? Well, your Jeopardy questions are to estimate about how many different cards there are of the Braves and of the Brewers. And if you're anywhere close, you're going to earn points. So go ahead and jot some numbers down. Think big. That's all. All right, here we go. I'll just say, right, naively, one might say, well, the Milwaukee Braves, how long were they in Milwaukee, you know, ballpark, without making the math exact, ballpark 15-ish years or a little less, and, you know, 25-ish players on the team, give or take, 15 times 25, and you might have a number ballpark 400 that would make sense to you, but the answer is actually 7,424. Now, here's the funny thing. I prepared my first draft of this presentation a couple weeks ago, and it was 7,100 and something. So only a few weeks went by and it went up by 300. That is the modern hobby, my friends. That is the modern hobby. And you're thinking, the modern hobby? Who's still making Milwaukee Braves cards? Oh no, here's what happens. Topps is doing that. They will make this year, 2021, let's just say, a Hank Aaron card on the Milwaukee Braves. Fair enough, and kind of nice and nostalgic. But they'll make it with a red border, a blue border, a green border, a silver border, a gray border. They'll make an autographed version in blue ink. They'll stamp one, 1 out of 1, even though it looks exactly like the ones that aren't 1 out of 1. They'll stamp another one, 3 out of 10, even though it looks exactly like the other ones that aren't 3 out of 10, right? So the point is, there's kind of this craziness in the modern hobby where numbers get huge. So now let's look at Milwaukee Brewers. And of course, the Milwaukee Brewers have been around even longer. So think big. By the way, award yourself a point if you put any number bigger than 5,000 for that first one. It's possible nobody gets that point, but any number bigger than 5,000. Milwaukee Brewers, 133,031. You're probably not going to collect them all. You probably wouldn't even want them all. And if I gave them all to you, which I don't have, you wouldn't even be able to fit them in your house, is my guess. And again, same kind of story. Now, of course, it makes sense that Topps is issuing a ton of Milwaukee Brewers. We have Milwaukee Brewers. But same deal. Do you want the yellow border Kristen Yelich, the green Sharpie autographed Kristen Yelich, the one with a piece of his stirrup, the one with a piece of a t-shirt that he never wore, right? The possibilities are literally endless. So give yourself a point if you chose any number above 50,000. You probably didn't, but give yourself a point if you did. Right. So if you want to take on a hobby that you'll never be done with, you'll never have to say, darn it, I'm done, what's next? I would say, here you go. Try collecting all these cards. Really don't. Okay, now we come to a pretty fun part of the presentation. I'm curious how this is going to go. I had a lot of fun putting this part together. Other Wisconsin teams. So who have we seen? We have seen the Milwaukee Brewers in different iterations. We've seen the Milwaukee Cream Cities. We've seen the Milwaukee Bears. We've seen the Milwaukee Braves, but we're just getting started. So many other Wisconsin teams, and that's the subject of Jeopardy round 4. So the way this is going to work is I've chosen a baseball card from each of the various Wisconsin baseball teams that have baseball cards, and you get to guess who it is. And of course, if you get it right, you get a point. And if not, don't worry, that's okay too. I tried where I could to get a player that might be a little more familiar. I didn't try to pick the most random or the least familiar. I tried, but of course, with some of these sets, I didn't have a lot of great options. But anyways, look at these 4 pictures and see if you know who any of these are, as I'm about to reveal. We'll start with the Beloit Brewers, and that is Greg Vaughn. So pretty good career there. Okay. Now we'll go to the Beloit Snappers, and I will give a hint and say very famous father. He had a very famous father who was far more successful in baseball than he was. And the answer is Stoney Mcguinn Jr. Okay, now we go to the Kenosha Comets. So we've got the anyways, we go to the Kenosha Comets, and the answer here, one of the greatest pitchers in the history of the league. Oh, I think I maybe didn't hide the name quite as well as I thought. But anyways, Nikki Fox, also known as Helen Nicole. So take a point for either of those. And then we get to the last one. And unlike Stoney Mcguinn Jr., who had a much more famous father, I'm going to say this player from the Kenosha Twins has a much more famous son. And the answer is, this is Pat Mahomes. So if anybody got 4 out of 4, I am super impressed. If anybody got 2 out of 4, I'm actually pretty impressed too. So But what's the purpose of this? It's just to show that baseball cards in terms of the Badger State are much more than just old Milwaukee Braves and modern Milwaukee Brewers. But you've got some of these other teams as well, but there's more. So let's go here. We see the Lacrosse Loggers, the Madison Black Wolf. I think it's Black Wolf, not even Black Wolves. I'm just going to leave that there. The Madison Hatters. I read it as haters. When I first saw it, I was like, wow, okay. And the Madison Muskies. And the Madison Muskies is kind of cool because it was produced by a company in Wisconsin. Some of you might know Larry Pritch trading cards. And I'll come back to that, by the way. So if you recognize any of these players, and I guess the second one isn't really a player, but if you can name any of these, perfect. Here we go. I will reveal the Lacrosse Loggers player actually was very recently in the news over checking for substances, I think, Max Scherzer. The Madison Black Wolf mascot, that was the best I could do with this set. I couldn't find like anybody would have heard of, is Willie B. Wild. So if you went to a game in 1998 and have a great memory, maybe. The Madison Hatters, again, I had to reach a bit, but at any rate, you might recognize them from the Brewers, I think. Yeah. And then the last player, maybe recognizable, and his colors as a Muskie matched his colors in the major leagues. He did get a little more buff, it turns out, as he progressed through his career. But that, of course, is Jose Canseco. So, okay, ready for 4 more.
Hey, Jason, his brother also played with the Muskies.
Yeah, I was thinking of trying to trick you guys and go with an Ozzie Canseco.
Well, and Ozzie had the Muskies record for consecutive games hitting streak, and that was always a favorite trivia question to use in Madison because nobody ever would have guessed Ozzie. So
I definitely wouldn't have guessed that. I definitely would not have guessed. Interesting. Okay, we even have one more sheet. So we have a team called the Milwaukee Chicks, again from the AAGBPL, also produced by Larry Pritch, Wisconsin's own. We have a set from 2009, but as the look might indicate, it wasn't a set of active players from 2009. It tended to be just a set of baseball personalities.
Why is that happening? I don't know. Mom's out there.
All right. We have a Racine Bell. And then finally, I'm going to have to move my pictures of everybody to remember the name. We have a Wausau Met. So those are our cards here. And they are Vivian Anderson. This next one, we would have seen in Baseball Reference as Dummy Hoy, not very long ago, but sort of a second place update in Baseball Reference, recent updates. Was Baseball Reference as sort of reverted away from nicknames, particularly if there's sort of a negative connotation to the nickname. So the player, once listed as Dummy Hoy is now Billy Hoy in Baseball Reference. Give yourself a point for either. On the Racine Bells, my friend Gummy Arts here in Chicago did this card of Joanne Winter. And then finally we come to a player that had some fame in the I think in the late 60s, maybe with the Red Sox. Mark might be a fan. Okay, so again, 1 point, right? 1 point for each. Oh my, there's still another one. I think this is my last one as we're getting late in the alphabet with Wisconsin teams. We've got the Wausau Timbers. I hope I didn't say that wrong. Wausau Timbers, I'll go with. The Wisconsin Rapids Twins, the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, and the Wisconsin Woodchucks. So any guesses on these players? I'll give a hint and say that this first player made the majors, retired, but is still on TV a lot, depending what station you watch for ball games and baseball content. The second player, I think I won't give a hint other than to say that WR, he was not a wide receiver. He was an infielder. The third player, I think I'll skip the hint. The fourth player, I'll indicate, actually tell you what, the third and fourth player both had some postseason heroics. Let me say that. So third and fourth player each with some postseason heroics. Well, the first player is MLB Network's Harold Reynolds, Wausau Timbers. The second player is Kent Herbeck kind of looked the same as through his whole playing career, I'd say. The next player on the card, David Arias, but give yourself credit for David Ortiz, same player. And then the last player was the 2016 World Series MVP, and that is Ben Zobrist, recently retired and going through legal hellishness at the moment for a variety of reasons, some self-inflicted. Okay, so how about those Badgers? So keep track of your own score. Badgers are interesting, of course. Wisconsin. The cards I could find of the Wisconsin Badgers dated pretty far back. So in the center, you'll see a postcard from 1909. And okay, is it really a baseball card? Okay, we'll just say yeah. But anyways, that was a tour of Japan, hence the writing along the bottom being in Japanese. And then you'll see these two pretty neat cards surrounding it. Those are actually silks, like literally, like, made out of like a kind of fabric. Murad College silks, and you've got pitcher and you've got hitter. I don't believe they were based off of specific players, but more just generic pitcher. So okay, so the Badgers do make it into Badger State baseball cards. So a quick salute, because I'm a collector and I ordered a lot from this man's catalog. I just wanted to give a shout out. He is no longer with us, by the way, but I'll give a shout out anyways to Larry Pritch. Wisconsin plays an important role in the history of the baseball card hobby. Larry Pritch was the first full-time baseball card dealer in the world more than 50 years ago, right? In the 80s, it seemed like everybody was a baseball card dealer. In 1970, or at least the month he set up shop, he was the only one in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I'm going to say Larry Pritch was also quite a bit ahead of his time in that he put out the very first sets to feature All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. In addition, I won't say he was first, but he was pretty early with a reasonably sized set of Negro League players. And in fact, it's that black and white Buck Leonard set that I ordered, I think when I was in college from Larry Pritch. I think it was my first purchase from the catalog after reading a book called Blackball Stars. So there you go. So quick shout out to Larry Pritch. And now back to things. So this is a little bit of a joke called Card Art Corner, but relevant to your interests. So one of my pals in SABR Chicago, John Roccanelli, has some fun with baseball cards, particularly when he can make plays on words based on the player names. He calls it his literal series. And he said to me, can I tell the story of Badger State baseball cards without this iconic card? And so it's Rob Deere doing exactly that. Right. And then you could add your own joke, like, give me all your dough, or or I'm short on some bucks, or, you name it. But at any rate, so Card Art Corner detour. There we go. All right, we won't stay long. We now hit Final Jeopardy. I don't want to keep anybody past midnight, so I'm going to do a quick time check. Final Jeopardy, and our subject today is Topps All-Stars. So let's jump right in. Category Topps All-Stars. The first year that the Topps flagship set, so the main kind of, the packs all the kids were buying, included All-Stars, was 1958. All-Star cards made their Topps flagship debut in 1958. In addition to manager Larry Haney, who had an All-Star card by virtue of being the World Series manager the previous year, which three Milwaukee Braves had All-Star cards? Your hint here is it's not a trick question. Okay, the answers are about to be revealed. Well, it is one of the finest big threes in the history of professional sports. Warren Spahn, Eddie Matthews, and Hank Aaron. Many of you may have scooped up all 5 points. So 1 point each, or 5 if you got the whole triple there. So there you go. Now, I think the next question is going to be a little harder in Final Jeopardy. I know there's only supposed to be one question, but again, the category is Topps All-Stars. Who was the first Milwaukee Brewer to earn a Topps All-Star card? And this question, even though it's only one answer, is worth 5 points. This could take you from last place to first if you pull this one off. the first Milwaukee Brewer to earn a Topps All-Star card? Okay. I will see some frowns when I say to people, it would be easy to think Robin Yount or Paul Molitor or even Ben Oglivie. But in fact, this player preceded those players even by a little bit in terms of all-starness on a baseball card. And so it is Don Money, 1979 Topps. I think I see a jubilant Matthew who may have just clinched the trophy here. A little bit of trivia that I'll add. I mentioned Ben Oglivie. The truth is, if you're a Ben Oglivie collector, you won't find a true Ben Oglivie Topps All-Star card. However, in 1981, he was slighted by Topps. They only made 2 American League All-Star outfielders, and the belief is that the third one was supposed to be Ben Oglivie. That sounds like a pretty tough mistake to make, but Topps made the same mistake in 1978 with American League All-Stars and slighted Richie Zisk. And in 1975, and if you can believe it, forgot about Reggie Jackson. So I believe also 1979, the year we're looking at this Don Money, they forgot to have an American League shortstop. And Freddie Patek would have earned his one All-Star card had they remembered. So there you go. So 5 points if you got Don Money. And there's still, though, one more way to get back in the race. 2 points each or 10 points for all 4. Which 4 Milwaukee catchers have had Topps All-Star cards? And my only hint I'm going to give here is it doesn't say Braves or Brewers. It just says Milwaukee. A tough one, but here we go. I'm going to reveal these answers chronologically, I think, if I did it right. So the first was Del Crandal. We've got All-Star cards for him from 1959, 1960, and 1961. So 3 consecutive years of Topps All-Star cards. Now, he's only one answer. Don't give yourself 3 points for Del Crandal. He's just one. But who's next? And who's next was Brewer, Ted Simmons. He also had an All-Star card in 1980, but as a Cardinal. So I'm only showing the Brewers here. Okay, who's next? These next 2 are much more recent. We've got 2-time Topps All-Star Jonathan Lukroy, and finally, much more recent, Yasmani Grandal. So those are your 4. If you somehow got all 4, I will be incredibly impressed, and you would earn 10 points. So let me ask this, because this was my last trivia question. And you, let's see, I will pull up I will say just go off mute. Did anybody score more than 10 points? If you did, just say yes.
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 Wow. Did anybody score more than 15 points?
Yes.
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 Wow. Okay. Did anybody score more than 18 points?
How many?
18?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Did anybody score 20 or more?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. 22 or more?
Yes.
I have 23.
Okay. Matthew?
25.
Wow. Okay. Did anybody beat 25? Okay. So Matthew, against all common sense, I bought a box of Topps Series 2 2021 cards. I have no idea why. And as you may know, when you open such a box, you're promised to get either one relic card or one auto, right? Well, once you know, I got a Brewer. I got an auto card of Devin Williams, of special interest to SABR, by the way. It is numbered 6 out of 25. And it's on its way to you if you just send me an address.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and of interest to SABR is this 179, if you can see it, this .179, and you might think, that was his batting average allowed, or maybe it was on. No, this is SABR. Topps made a baseball card where they literally like headlined him for his XWOBA allowed. I will confess, I don't even know what that is, but this is the Devin Williams signature 6/25 XWOBA allowed card. So it felt like a fitting prize. So congratulations. Congratulations, by the way. And then let's see, is it Mary who had the other very high score? Do I have that
I
right?
had 23.
That's incredible as well. That's incredible as well. You know how people sometimes would assume that Alex Trebek must know everything because he hosts the show, but no, not really, because he gets to read the teleprompter. I'm going to acknowledge my own score in this probably would have been about 10. No, maybe 12, maybe 12. But I did just write an article for the SABR Baseball Cards blog that literally encyclopedically, if that's a word, listed every single Topps All-Star card ever made. And I did sort by team and do things like that as I was writing the article. So I was a little smarter about All-Star cards than I normally would have been. But yeah, I think maybe I would have gotten 15. I don't know. Okay, so with that, I'm going to say thank you, Ken Keltner chapter. And I've got a little montage here of Ken Keltner cards I wish I owned. And I'll leave you with my email if people like to do that, or on Twitter, Heavy J. So I'm Heavy J 28 on Twitter. But maybe more apropos to this discussion, I moderate the SABR Baseball Cards, aka SABR BB Cards account, and we try to put some fun things out there, you know, every day or so. Sometimes every 10 minutes if time permits. So yeah, so I'll say thank you for now, and then let's see. I'm just gonna say, Dennis, pretend that I'm not smart enough to know how to work the. Oh, maybe now I am. Now that I've stopped sharing, let's see. Dennis, do you have access to if anybody typed in any questions during the presentation?
I see some chats.
There.
Brett Haney.
Yes.
Larry Haney, yeah.
Oh, shoot. Yes. My bad.
And
okay.
In 1975, Aaron was a question from Mark also.
Yeah. Tell me about that, Mark.
No, I forgot. I was thinking I shouldn't have thought you would have screwed this up, but 75, of course, Aaron got a Brewer card and he got an All-Star card, but they weren't the same card.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, 75 was really quirky for Hank Aaron because he was the first and last card in the set. The last card in the set was one of those famously Topps airbrushed Hank Aaron with a Brewers cap kind of turned sideways, and some people think it's a really majestic card. Other people think they just made a really ugly card of Hank Aaron somehow. But then he also was card number 1 in the set, and it was an unusual juxtaposition because he was an all-star the prior year with the Braves. They chose to take his probably the best highlights / record breaker card ever made, because it was breaking Babe Ruth's home run record. It was essentially a record breaker or highlights card, showing him on the Braves as the new home run king. But they put the all-star star on that card. So yeah, so his all-star card that year was as a Brave. That's right. Mm-hmm. As an Atlanta Brave, I'll even.
And the other comment out here was from Mary. So excellent. Thank you, Jason.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, Mary. Thank you. All right. So with that, any live questions are welcome now.
Richard.
Yeah. And Jason, this is just more of a comment because you kind of did it with the Boston Braves, mentioning that like clearly, they found out about the change late, so they didn't change it till halfway through. Well, I mean, it was the same thing with the Brewers and the Seattle Pilots. In fact, you think about Topps's production schedule. I mean, the team was at spring training as the Seattle Pilots. They didn't even know they were going. It was literally when they got on the bus. They went north and northeast instead of northwest. That's when they found out. I think that it was close to that. That's when they found out they were going to Milwaukee. So there was no way Topps would have been ahead of that.
Not to trudge up past trauma for any Milwaukee Braves fans, but a year I had in sort of my initial draft and I finally got rid of. 1966 Topps was interesting because those cards all said Atlanta Braves, right? The 1966 cards, but they really didn't have Atlanta Braves photos until the very late issues of that set. And so in the first, maybe the first 15 or so Braves in the set, you'll see every single thing Topps ever did to protect themselves against the guy changing teams or whatnot. So you'll see a lot of players with no hat at all, right? So you could just stamp any team you want. You see a lot of profiles where you can't, you know, if there were a logo on the hat, you wouldn't be able to see what it was. You also see really, really bad airbrushing of the Milwaukee M, like really wretched ones. And then I call this the Milwaukee Braves Last Stand. The 1966 Topps set included some league leader cards, and the Braves had some players who were among the league leaders. Topps kind of had a quirky thing, but it makes sense. When they would show a league leader, they wanted to go with the team he was on when he led the league the year before. And so on their 1966 league leader cards, you'll actually see like Hank Aaron in a full-fledged Milwaukee Braves cap. And they're not, you know, shy about that. They're not going to airbrush out that M. But the 66 set, like 53, you see kind of this progression from one city to the next. And finally, by the later series, including Hank Aaron's card, you have an actual Atlanta Braves uniform, cap, and everything on these guys. But yeah, 66, if you look at that team set, it's definitely got some eyesores and might bring back some sad memories as well. Other questions?
Yeah, especially like
1991.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the whole question about
1991.
What was the question?
Did you do the team from 1891?
Oh, shoot. I don't think I did. Are there cards? Do you know?
That's the American Association when it was considered a major league.
Okay. I don't think that I uncovered any cards from that. I can look in case I missed something. I'm gonna take a look, Bob.
Okay.
It's possible there were no cards, and then sometimes with the older issues, either the checklist is incomplete or the checklist is there, but you can't find any images of the cards themselves. That'll
They
happen
only
too.
played part of the season for Milwaukee.
Oh, is that? And where else were they?
Cincinnati.
Oh,
They
wow. Okay.
faced Cincinnati when they went broke.
Oh, wow.
A
Okay.
year later, they found some money and they came back.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna take a fresh look at that one because yeah, definitely I didn't have any of that in this presentation. And so they were actually the Brewers. We're not talking cream cities here. We're talking
No.
Brewers. Cool.
You mentioned that there was a 1901 Brewers team as well
Yes.
in the American League.
Yes. Yes.
Baltimore
But I think
Orioles.
with no cards.
Absolutely, right.
Yeah, I think with no cards. Yeah, in fact, one of the highlights, I of course drove up to American Family Field for Hank Aaron bobblehead day a few weeks ago, and that was actually, it was a really well pitched game. I think 13 strikeouts and all this kind of stuff for Burns. But one of the things that was cool, I didn't know about all the markers and stuff around the stadium, but yeah, I think it must have been the 1901 Brewers team, and Hugh Duffy's name was on it. I didn't realize that he had a Milwaukee connection.
There's a comment also from Mike Carey. One thing that made baseball cards big with Brewer fans
Yeah.
were police sets in the early 80s.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm just gonna say it. And for those of you who grew up in Wisconsin, I'm probably just telling you in an approximate, mostly incorrect way, stuff that you know way better than me. Just as a card collector, I'm gonna say the 1980s Milwaukee Brewers police sets are the craziest things ever. It's like if you wanted all of Robin Yount's cards, it was kind of like every single individual police department in all of Wisconsin put one out, but you know, with a different back, you know, their department on the back. And so I don't even know what the number is, Matthew, maybe you have an estimate, but it just feels like there's 40 different, you know, Robin Yount police cards from the same year, you know, at
Yeah,
least.
that's probably about right. It was, yeah, basically every other county in Wisconsin had their own set. They all looked the same except for the name of the police department, or some of them had other sponsors, but that's it was 30-ish cards in each set with the players and the coaches, and then times 40 or 50. So that's a big part of that 100,000.
Yeah.
Those police sets from the 80s. Yeah, there is, I know of at least one guy out there who tries to collect all of the sets. That's a big undertaking to try to get every set.
I have literally 0 of them, but the experience I have with them is sometimes if I'm working on an article or something, I'll say, oh, let me pull up some Robin Yount cards. Oh, let me take a look at 1986 or something. And I'll go into trading card database and I'll just kind of do this view where I'll see 10 of his cards from 1986, and then I'll go to the next page and there's 10 more. Well, when I hit these police sets, I just skip ahead. Like, let me not click next. Let me click the number like 5 pages past this one. And sometimes, oh no, it's still more. I'm not done yet. I still haven't run cards. So,
and they're also like, I don't know the exact size of them. They're not standard size, but I don't think there are any other cards anywhere else that are that exact size as those Milwaukee or those Brewers Police Department cards. They're incredibly absurd.
As a kid, I collected the LAPD, Los Angeles Dodger sets from policemen, and it was nice because my neighbor's son was a police officer, and he'd sometimes on his break, visit his mom, and so he'd always give me a stack. And they were kind of oddball size. They were definitely bigger than standard baseball cards. But yeah, from I think 1980 to 1983-ish or something, I ended up with some pretty good stacks of those. Okay, I think now I'm in the comments. I see something from David, especially like the tops 54 and 55 because of all the information on the front of the card, picture of the player's head, action photo, autograph, team logo, name, position. Oh my God. Yeah, I am kind of the same way. So here's the thing. Many collectors that I know absolutely adore 1953 Bowman. I showed that included the Warren Spahn, but it's really just a photo. It's just a photo. It doesn't even have the name. You got to flip it over, right? I'm going to say 2 things that are true at the same time. That's an absolutely gorgeous set, one of the most gorgeous sets ever made. But that aside, I love it when the card has the player's name, the player's team, maybe even a team logo, the fake signature. Yeah, to me, the more elements on the front, the better. That's not everybody, but David, I am with you. And yeah, the 54, 55 with kind of the head art or head colored in photo and the action shot. You can't go wrong. 56 kind of similar in terms of all the cool things that it brings. So yeah, I'm in love with those sets. I would call 54 to 57 top the best 4-year run in the history of Topps baseball cards, at least. But yeah, I've talked to other people that would put like 50 to 53 Bowman that has hardly any of these elements as potentially the best 4-year run of the last 70-ish years of baseball cards. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Jason, can I ask you about Henry J Studios?
You can ask me about Heavy J Studios if you like, but not Henry.
You know what? It's interesting. I had Heavy James up here and I retyped it down here and screwed it up. How about Heavy James? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to ask. And so I promise this is not nearly as lengthy as the prior thing that you all just sat through. But unfortunately, I don't think I brought prizes for this half either. I shouldn't call it half. It's like a 10th. I'll just show. So I mentioned Heavy J Studios at the beginning. It's just kind of a labor of love, making these little glittery art collage cards to raise money for great causes. I'll just show some personal highlights. Can I advance this? Yeah, there you go. These are 3 fun ones I made. If you collected Fleer in 1989, you'll get a laugh from the first one. If not, don't worry too much. I've got Glenn Burke in the middle, and I was proud of myself. The origin of this Glenn Burke card was I bought a pack of 1989 Donruss last year, and I literally got no good players, like none. I didn't even get anybody who had good steroid stats. Like, it was just a pack of all awful players, and I was going to literally throw it in the garbage. But somebody asked me, could I make them a Glenn Burke card? In fact, one of Wisconsin's own, it's a Hall of Very Good co-host Lou Olson from Kenosha. But anyways, and then the thought just popped into my head, I can cut all my bottom borders off that horrible pack of Donruss and maybe make a little rainbow flag for Glenn Burke. So that was one of my more resourceful efforts. And then I have to tell you, in 1983, I was in absolute denial that Steve Garvey left the Dodgers. Absolute denial. I don't blame him for it anymore because SABR 49, he gave his side of the story. So I blame the Dodgers. But at any rate, part of that denial was I turned his Topps Traded Padres card back into a Dodgers.
Okay.
So that was an act of card art rebellion. Some other fun I have as a Dodger fan, Topps put out a set. The artist F. Did a stadium series that included Dodger Stadium. And to me, it just felt like a natural to turn it into some of the greatest moments in Dodger history, like Fernando Mania, Kirk Gibson's homer, Vin Scully's farewell, etc. So that's a little set I did to raise a lot of money for youth mentoring in LA. There is an ongoing, if you love Josh Gibson and kind of homemade baseball cards, there's an ongoing Josh Gibson card art tournament that I'm in. I'm actually a co-organizer. So I did one of the cards, the one with the arrows. The other four are just friends of mine. And overall, we're going to have about 75 entries wrapping up in just a couple of weeks. So that's part of the Heavy J Studios thing, is entering tournaments. I will not win this one. If you saw some of the stuff, you'd be really impressed. Now, some of my cards have made it into unusual hands. So I'm boasting a little. I'm being a name dropper. But that is Dave Parker, Cobra, one of the greatest Brewers designated hitters of all time, I might add, holding a Heavy J Studios card. So that was a thrill. And Dave Jordan, who just wrote the Cobra bio, facilitated that one. I thought I was sending Dave Jordan a card. Joke was on me. He asked for it so he could give it to DP. So that was awesome. And then this was literally just last week. I mentioned Steve Garvey as my favorite player. Well, Steve Garvey's favorite daughter, Olivia, who does the sports for ABC in Washington, D.C., participated in an event I did. And so there she is with her Heavy J Studios, Steve Garvey. So kind of a thrill there. And she's like, I'm going to show this to my dad. So I was like, wow, I did mail him one like a year ago, and I think he just threw it in the garbage. But okay, coming from you, he'll be more impressed. But to really to really impress you probably isn't to show you my designs, but just to show you what's happened. And this is all since last June. So I'm almost at $17,000. Different organizations like the Josh Gibson Foundation, the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. The second and third ones, went with a lot less revenue than normal during the pandemic. So, I wanted to help out how I could, but anyways, you see kind of a little mix here of where the money went, and I keep kind of a Google sheet, so anybody who wants can check that out and all of that. So so that's good. I did it to try to make a little more of a difference in the world, I guess, in a way that combined the things I really love, which are of course baseball cards, but also arts and crafts. And then in terms of the event that Steve Garvey's daughter attended, I did my first ever workshop for a youth RBI baseball team in Washington, D.C. It was a virtual workshop where I sent them kits and they made cards, over Zoom with me. So, those are all, it's not all the things I love. I have a wife and kids somewhere in this house too. But there are many of the things I love sort of rolled into one. So, this isn't a sales pitch, but if anybody is like, oh, I'd love a card of Robin Yount or whatever, heavyjstudios.com, or you've got my contact info. Sometimes I just make a card and see if anybody wants it. And then, but I'm going to say in most cases, people just make a special request to me and I do my best. I've got a lot of cards in my collection, so I can usually find what people ask for. Okay.
I will put that website information and all out there on the newsletter, on the rewrite on the meeting here. I'll also include the podcast you did with the boys from whatever.
Yeah, the whole very good.
Almost great. Yeah, that was a very good. When I listened to a lot of podcasts, when I heard that one and it said Jason Schwartz, is it or Jason Schwartz from SABR? Yeah. So yeah, and that was a fun. They're fun anyhow. They ask goofy questions. That was a good. So I'll include that as well.
Yeah. Now, conscious of the fact that I'm talking to some folks in Milwaukee, there's a part of that interview that could be construed as slander against one of Milwaukee's favorite cousins. Okay, so if you happen to be a huge Chachi Arcola fan from Happy Days, I apologize. I can only speak from my experience. But you know, I don't want to knock him off any pedestal he might be on as one of Milwaukee's favorite fictional cousins.
Yeah.
So Joni loves Chachi, but Jason doesn't.
Yeah. That was,
I don't think there's any worries there.
but it was a
A
good.
lot of buzz on the street about Chachi.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Any other questions for Jason? Okay. So before we get away real quick, a couple items I want to mention. July 7th, we don't have a newsletter out yet. Are we getting something out on it? There's a new ball club from the American Association of Professional Baseball coming to Oconomowoc. And they're building a brand new ballpark. Tom Kelnick is going to be our guest to talk about that. He's also Jared Kelnick's father, so we'll probably do some proud dad talking about his son. But the purpose of that meeting will be to really to start the process of following the process of forming a new ball club, building a new stadium, and it's something that I'm looking forward to. Can we have something in monthly? I've asked Tom about reaching out to the new general manager. Maybe that general manager can give us an update monthly. Mike Carey, I'm putting pressure on Mike here. He lives in town. Maybe he can get pictures or something. So we can kind of follow this to opening day next April. Just it'd be something different, I thought. So that's going to be July 7th. I'll get information out on that for the newsletter. Starting in July, we're going to have one of the things that came out of the survey was a trivia. I asked Rick to do trivia, and he's got the first 7 questions. And so we'll have trivia by Rick Schabowski starting in the next newsletter. Don't forget about Mark coming here on August 26th. We'll get a tailgate party out. If you're interested, let me know. I will also get something out in the newsletter on that, so anybody who's interested, so we can get a SABR outing at the ballpark and just, tailgate and see some baseball. So anything else anybody else would like to add? Update on book club, Mary?
Yes, we're doing, per Dennis's recommendation, A Year of Playing Catch with written by Ethan D. Bryan. And I just managed to contact him. He seems like a wonderful person. He's actually on tour now. He's got this gig where he's giving out free gloves. He's going to a few cities. So like yesterday, he was in Rockford. So he gave gloves to all the little Rockford Peaches. It's an all-girls Little League team that he met with yesterday. So he's on the road right now. So I'm hoping we can meet with him at least virtually. He seems very receptive to that. Maybe he'll be circling around Milwaukee. So I'll keep everyone updated. But Dennis and I were thinking of an in-person meeting on August 14th at Estabrook Park, the beer garden. So you can get beer and sausages and like, what more do you need? But we'll be discussing the book A Year of Playing Catch, and maybe we'll Zoom with Ethan, or maybe he can join us. So we'll see what happens.
And the other
So any questions about that? Or
we're going to play catch.
we're gonna play catch. Bring your gloves
That's
if you have
one of
any arm left. Yeah, I'm gonna bring my vintage gloves. So
Yeah, I've got some too. So yeah.
be nice, because I have a split finger. So
Make sure you warm up first, though.
yeah, absolutely. I'll have to warm up for days.
And what I'd like to do is, I've got some questions I'd like to throw at some people in the chapter for some ideas. They don't have to be part of the video. So let me just say thank you to Jason. Now I'll end the video and then we can talk further. But Jason, thank you. I knew this would be great. You exceeded that. So thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Well, hey, everybody, thank you for having me. I've got some family stuff to go tend to, so I won't head to the bar with you. But it's my pleasure. I'm always happy to come back. I sure had a great time when we had our joint SABR Day, Milwaukee, Chicago, pre-pandemic. Hopefully we can do another live one, maybe for 2022.
Yep, we got to figure out how to do that one. You're right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody.
All right, take care.